Hi, this is Jeff Harmon from Brilliance Within with a new episode of Conversations That Life Science Leaders Aren't Having. I'm excited today to welcome Dr. Ian White. Ian is the founder, president, and chief science officer of Neobiosis. Neobiosis is on a mission to reshape and redefine the field of regenerative medicine. And as I've gotten to know Ian, who he has become and is to me is two C's: courage and creation. And this has really shaped him, these two ways of showing up in the world, from his very earliest years to the 1970s, where he will share with us the inspiration for his imagination and for his creativity and his courage along the way to step into leadership and to greater levels of service. I think you're really going to enjoy this conversation. Dr. Ian White, it is such a pleasure to have you on the podcast today. You heard me just give a very brief introduction of you. What I'd love to start with is just to let us know what you're up to in the world. I know there's some really exciting things happening right now.
Yeah, well, Jeff, thanks for that really nice introduction. I appreciate it. And thanks for inviting me onto the podcast. This is a great show. I think you've shared a lot of really exciting information on some of the other episodes. So I'm really excited to be part of that narrative. So about me, as I mentioned before we got on the show, we just came back from the grand opening of our new laboratory in Gainesville, Florida. I'm fortunate enough to have the opportunity to launch that new facility. It's a CGMP compliant ISO 7 clean room for the manufacturing of perinatal tissues that we hope to be using in upcoming clinical trials. One of which will be for post-COVID syndrome, which is very exciting because there are currently no treatments for post-COVID syndrome, and a lot of people aren't really talking about it. But it's a coming wave. It's a very big issue. At least over 200 million people diagnosed so far with symptoms associated with post-COVID. And so we have a product that we have been testing, and it looks like it works very well for modulating inflammation. And we're pursuing the clinical trial route. So that's very exciting. That's what I've been doing most recently. The company that I started is called Neobiosis. That means new life. And the idea there is that we are a CDMO. So we manufacture and develop products for other companies and our own pipeline focused on the science of regenerative medicine.
And your journey in regenerative medicine is not a new thing. This has been your life.
20 years.
Yeah, 20 years. What's behind that? What was behind that decision? Like, to make this your story, the narrative that would define your life?
Well, there are many different ways to answer that question. I think the first, and it's going to sound a little arrogant perhaps, but I feel like I couldn't really trust it to anybody else. This is such an important field, and I've been working and studying in this space for so long. And, I care about the outcomes of the patients, which is, the most important thing for our company is the outcome, the safety, the outcome for the patient. And I just saw a lot of other companies doing it wrong. And I felt that this industry really needed some leadership, some direction, and some quality. And I felt that I could contribute that. And so I just did it. That's a big thing of our company, is that we realized that sometimes you just got to do it. And I didn't necessarily feel that I was the most qualified, the most appropriate individual, but I just did it. And we've made some real inroads and some major impact in this industry so far.
Wow, there's so much there. That I'd love to dive into, but one place that we always like to start with our guests is to get behind the work, really into the heart of you, because there's just so much that there's so much richness I know in you and all of our guests that remains hidden in the two-dimensional world that we live in, and that is LinkedIn and social media. And so I'd love to go behind the curtain, so to speak, and ask you our three H's.
Okay.
that our audience can get to know you a little bit better before we dive into those other details. The three H's are your hero or a hero, a hardship, and a highlight. And I was wondering if you could just give us your response to those three H's.
Yeah. Does it have to be a single answer for each? Because I could probably
you go wherever you want to go.
So let's start. So hero. Well, that's easy. So I have a hero, and I have somebody that I admire and I think is really responsible for where I am today. So my hero is definitely David Attenborough. So British broadcaster, amazing scientist. And from an early age, really, I become addicted to science through watching Wildlife on One and his other TV shows, where he really presented natural biology in a way that wasn't presented by others. And it was compelling and exciting and immersive. You felt that you were part of his journey, and the way that he told the stories, the narratives, built the narratives, was just something very inspiring as a young scientist. I didn't know that I wanted to be a biologist at that point. I actually was planning to go into the RAF like my father. But these TV shows were just my favorite thing to watch. Seeing species that I'd never heard of before, learning about adaptations that animals had made to fit better with their environment. So this really was the keystone to my career. That's what really started me as a scientist. And I followed David's career up until today. You know, he's still going strong. And so what a wonderful individual that person is. And I hope, I pray one day I get the chance to meet him, because that would be a dream come true. So I would say that's definitely my hero. Somebody who I have to sort of appreciate for getting me to where I am is George Lucas. George Lucas, the filmmaker. So he made the movie Star Wars. And I've mentioned this to others before, but it really sort of just only hit me recently that I really have Star Wars to thank for being such a good scientist, because what Star Wars did back then, and there was very little like it, was give me permission to have an imagination. Right. So all the toys that I played with, all the stories I made up in my own brain were all the seed came from Star Wars, just giving me those raw materials, saying, look, there is a universe out there. Imagine what could exist. And then the narrative that was told by George really was inspiring. And so, again, I think that movie really gave me the permission to have imagination. And without imagination, you can't have empathy. And it's really empathy that drives scientists. And I don't mean the type of empathy where you can feel bad for somebody who's going through a hardship. I mean, being able to put yourself in the position of others. And so a lot of scientists need to do that in order to understand maybe psychology or any other branch of medicine. But also, as a bench scientist, we need to be able to see the bacteria or the DNA or the viruses in our mind's eye when we're manipulating it to try to understand how to get the best possible outcomes in the experiment. So imagination, empathy, these are critical things that good scientists have. And I don't think people really understand what that means. You know, that if you're a scientist, great. But if you have empathy, then you could be a great scientist.
Yeah, what a gift early on to be able to have. I love the way you phrase that, Ian, of permission. You had permission to be creative,
Dream, to have an imagination.
Yeah, to have an imagination, and even permission. You didn't say it this way, but I'm wondering, is permission to have empathy. It feels like you and I are around the same age, you know, growing up in the 70s and 80s, there still was, okay, be a strong boy, be a man. You know, empathy wasn't really invited for us to do that. We had this caricature that sometimes we had to fit into. Do you feel like there was permission to be empathetic as well?
Yeah, I think so. I think that, a lot of those stories back then, especially Star Wars, where you had a strong female lead, which was very unusual for the 70s. to have such a lead like that. I think it gave you the ability to see how the opposite sex might contribute to a situation. In the case of Star Wars, they were trying to escape from the Death Star, and that female lead had a very powerful impact on me when it came to female leadership. And in fact, I think that even now, just having this conversation, I'm thinking, I have a lot of very strong female characters in my organization. And I think that perhaps being open to the contributions of everybody, not just the stereotypes that we're used to seeing in business and in science, but really having the ability to see the potential of everybody has allowed me to build the team that I've built. And I think I have an incredibly strong team. So you've actually made me think a little bit there. I think that's probably percolated through my career until today.
Mm. Yeah, so cool. I love it. What about, you can go either hardship or highlight.
Right, so that's right. So well, I mean, to be honest, my whole career has been sort of a hardship because it's been a grind. When you're a scientist, a postdoc, an article just came out today in Nature, actually, talking about this mass exodus of academics because it's just too hard now. The universities don't help young scientists. Scientists in their 30s are typically considered the most productive. It's the most productive time of their career, but they're not getting any help. They're not getting any grants. It's the established scientists who are typically past their prime that are still getting the funding. And so for me, it was a grind. I could never get a grant, even though I won awards and my work was featured on the cover of prestigious journals. I could never get a grant because my work was considered too fringe. I could never get a promotion because I was stuck in a catch-22. If you don't have a grant, you can't get a promotion. If you don't have a promotion, you can't get a grant. So I was stuck in this academic cycle, and for my whole career, I had this romantic idea of having my own lab and being the boss and calling the shots and directing the science, and it just wasn't happening. And so I would work, 7 days a week, 16, 18 hours a day, especially while I was at Harvard, no friends really, just grinding it out and doing the work and having nothing to show for it at the end. No promotions, no pay raises. It was brutal. And that continued through most of my career. And I think as a scientist, you have to have tough skin because on a daily basis, sometimes experiments don't work, reagents get spilled, all kinds of things happen. And all you want to see is the result. You're desperate to see the result of this experiment. And every day can be a challenge, just getting there. So you sort of get used to rejection and failure and just continue to build on that. So the hardships have been long. Even recently, after leaving academia and I helped start some other companies, I had to leave them because we didn't see eye to eye on certain things. And then COVID hit and I was without work for 6 months. I had to sell my car. We had to figure out how to, pay for the house, pay for the kids for school. And it was really, really tough. But these are the decisions I had to make to get to the goal, to get to where I am. I had no idea where I was going necessarily, but I knew that if I just kept going forward, I would eventually get there. And I feel like I have got there. So long sort of way to the answer, but the hardships really have just been getting here. The small roadblocks in academia as a postdoc, trying to get promotions, never getting anywhere, just having to keep your chin up and keep going. That's really been the hardship.
And what made the difference? Because the trend, as you just noted in the article from Nature, is the exodus.
Yeah.
What was different in the midst of the hardship? And you and your wife were looking at each other saying, what next?
Yeah.
What was it that allowed you to persevere?
So when I was growing up, as I mentioned, my dad was in the Air Force. And so we moved every 2 years to a new base. And so I think perhaps that contributed something because I had to rebuild every 2 years, all my friendships, get used to a new environment. And so you don't sort of rest on your laurels. You don't just get used to where you are. You know that a surprise is coming. You sometimes dread it, but when it comes, you're sort of prepared and you have some tools, not all of the tools, but some tools to navigate it and to survive it. And I think that was a big part of it. When it was coming to a point where I had to make a decision, stay in academia or leave, I considered all kinds of things, a builder, delivering pizza, raising bunny rabbits, all these things, just because I didn't know where to go. And so my passion has always been medicine. I knew that I was good at what I did. I went to the World Stem Cell Summit and I looked around and I saw all these companies building and making products that I knew how to build and make. And they were really low quality products, a lot of them. And so I took a gamble. I made some products that I knew how to make. I sent them away for analysis. And I asked the same company that was used by some of these really big companies to evaluate my product. And it came back that my product was really, really good. And I said to myself, okay, look, if I don't do it now, I'm never going to do it. I've got a potential product here. Now I've just got to find the money. And it was very, very scary to leave even the small amount of money you get as a postdoc, because it's income, it's a guaranteed income. But I jumped in the deep end, and thankfully there was somebody there many people there to catch me.
And you didn't use this word before, but I got the sense of you really feel that this is a calling.
Yeah.
I think the word you use is, I didn't trust anybody else to do it the way that I could do it. And those are words that I for me, to speak to a sense of calling. And I'm wondering if that deep sense of calling, like this is what I am supposed to be doing, I'm wondering the role that played also in you persevering through those hardships.
Yeah. Well, I've always been conscious of the luck of having motivation, and I can't overstate that enough. I'll give you an example. So, here in Miami, and I guess all around the world, you see a lot of homeless people, and a lot of them are treated very poorly by passers-by, but I have a lot of empathy for them, because what I've discovered over my years is that you can be lucky and you can be unlucky to be born or not born with motivation. And that's not necessarily something you can cultivate yourself. I was born with this inability to stop, where I'm always thinking, I'm always Googling, I'm always, back in the day, we didn't have Google, but we had encyclopedias. And I would just pore over encyclopedias and dictionaries, even learning what words meant. And I couldn't stop myself. I just had this innate need to fill something in. And, a lot of the homeless people just weren't born with that. And they struggle to get motivated. They struggle to push. And this is what ends up happening to them. And so I don't consider myself any better than these guys. What I consider myself is infinitely more fortunate, because I was born with this motivation that drives me just to keep moving forward all the time. Does that answer your question?
Yeah. I mean, there's just something in you. It's almost
something in you, and I can't explain it. It's just there.
Yeah. Makes a lot of sense. And highlight. Maybe it comes from just these couple of days ago. What would you name to be your highlight?
Well, all those hardships are also highlights, because I learned a lot about myself. I learned how to grow. I met people that I wouldn't have necessarily had the chance to meet. There are many examples in literature and in current media where the student has to go through a hardship in order to come out the other side better. And I think that's a big part of being human, is that hardship makes us harder. And I'm not saying that we should torture ourselves, but I went through a lot of hardships, and I think I came out harder on the other end. And so those are certainly highlights. But my biggest highlight at the moment, of course, outside of family, is the opening of our new lab. This has been a dream of mine for many, many years. Ever since I read the book Arrowsmith by Sinclair Lewis. The story is a scientist back in the day in the 50s. They were studying bacteria. They were bacteriologists. And I had this image of him sitting in his lab, this wooden lab with metal stools, smoking a pipe, and 3 a.m. talking about science and having eureka moments and doing another experiment at 4 a.m. And these are the romantic ideas that I had. I don't smoke anymore, but I did buy a pipe, and it is on my bookshelf to represent this. I feel like I sort of made it.
You just alluded, you alluded to the hero's journey, and it's kind of interesting. Just given we were talking about Star Wars
too,
Skywalker a few minutes ago, and one of the things I love about the hero's journey is there's this external context, the Death Star and facing your father, and all that. But what I've come to appreciate about the hero's journey is the internal cave that the hero goes into, that emerges. And I'm wondering, in all of this, there's lots of externals that are part of your hero's journey. I'm wondering, what's the internal cave that you had to go into before you would, and maybe you're still there, I'm not sure, but what's that internal cave that you've had to go into to emerge in your hero's journey?
Well, I think confidence. I had to learn confidence. That's probably the biggest part of it, because when I was a student, I hated public speaking. It would terrify me, and sometimes I would even have to write out speeches or presentations, and garble through them, and it was horribly embarrassing. And I had to really deconstruct myself and try to teach myself how to be brave enough to speak, and how to be concise, and how to be clear. And all this is sort of coming together now, actually. But yeah, I started writing scripts as well, screenplays. And you're talking about the hero's journey. I feel like I've sort of had to learn the hero's journey myself to understand the hardships you need to go through, and the orchestra moment at the end of the movie where you suddenly see the fruits of all your labors. Everything does seem to fall in cycles. This is really interesting. So I had to learn my own narrative. I had to learn what it means to be a scientist, how to communicate effectively, because without effective communication, you can be the best scientist in the world, you can have the best idea for a business, but unless you can communicate that effectively, I think that's my biggest thing, is going inside deep and trying to understand, what does it mean to tell a story?
And in the story that's being written real time with you, who are you becoming? So I'll come back to the lab to leader journey here in a minute, because I think that's a really important piece. But in this narrative that you're in, it's your life. Who are you becoming?
I think I'm becoming a facilitator, like an enzyme. I'm allowing everybody around me to achieve the things that they also want to achieve. So everybody from my employees, my team members, to the patients that end up getting these products, I feel like I can be a conduit to going from a space where something doesn't exist to a space where something does exist, whether we're talking about helping my team members with their careers and giving them the tools and the resources they need to grow themselves, or whether it's to make the best possible product, to work with the FDA, to work with lawmakers, to get these products to patients, because they're unbelievably valuable technologies that we're developing. And I feel that this job, this career path, is allowing me to be that conduit, to be that facilitator, to get that material from where it means relatively nothing, because the products we start with are considered medical waste, to then turning it into something that can change and often save people's lives. So I think that this journey for me isn't a journey to the top. It's a journey to open a door for other opportunities for those around me, and for myself, and for the patients.
And what has needed, or what have you noticed the shift to be, the internal shift to be, in order for you to become that facilitator?
So one of the things we like to say at the lab is just do it. Right. So I had to learn to just do it. Everybody has these imposter, was it called? Like an imposter syndrome or something. Yeah. Everybody goes through that, where you don't feel like you're good enough, or you don't feel like you have the right capital, or you don't feel like you've had the appropriate opportunities. And so there's always an excuse not to do it. But those who do it are the ones that can succeed. You never score a goal unless you kick the ball. So, just doing it was important for me to learn. And I'm not that type of person who really could just do it. I was never very popular at school because, again, we traveled so much, and, I was also focused on science. I wasn't playing soccer. I wasn't playing rugby. I wasn't playing cricket. I was focused on science. So I was always sort of on the outside. So I never really had that confidence just to believe in myself and do it. But I can maybe give you an example of how I feel that that's changed. I'll give you a couple, actually. So when I was doing my PhD, while I was studying for my PhD at Cornell, I started a company, and that company was called Grasshopper Outdoor Products, and I invented fishing products. And, I had to go through a huge process of learning how to find a prototyper, how to find a manufacturing facility in China, and communicating with China, and working on those projects. And the product that I ended up developing, called the Monomaster, ended up winning a prize by Field and Stream magazine. It was featured on TV, radio, carried in Bass Pro Shops, Cabela's, LL Bean. And, it became a really big success because I just, I did it. I sat there in the evenings and I worked on doing this. And I got a lot of confidence from that. I've always invented, I've always created ideas. And again, that comes from that permission Star Wars gave me to be innovative. And I materialized something. I created something from nothing, and I put it into the world, and people bought it and used it and liked it. So that gave me a huge amount of confidence. And I think my confidence has continued to build. And recently I was with a business partner at an airport. I think we were in Arizona or somewhere really hot. And the flight was delayed. And everybody's getting grouchy, of course. And then they let us on the airplane, but the air conditioning was broken on the airplane. And so we sat on the airplane for an hour in sweltering heat. And then finally the captain said, look, guys, I'm not going to take off. I'm not going to subject you to this heat. We're going to debark. We're going to get another airplane. So everybody was furious. And so we got off the airplane and everybody made a beeline to the bar. That's what everybody went to get a cold beer at the bar, and the barman wasn't there. The barman wasn't there. And everybody's now like really pissed. And so I jumped over the bar and I just started pouring people pints. And, I said, hey, remember, this is not free beer. We're still paying for this. But, everybody was, anxious. The situation was starting to degenerate. And so I took it upon myself to try to de-escalate the situation and do something that was risky. I could have gone to jail for stealing, the beer. And it's in an airport. They don't take a lot of, they don't mess around at airports. But I jumped over the bar. I poured maybe 20 pints. I served some wines. And then the server came back and was like, what's going on? And I was like, okay, that guy owes you two beers. That guy owes you that. And we gave him a huge tip. Everybody was happy. They boarded the flight and off we went. So I don't think I would have had the confidence to do that, when I was younger. But as a leader, I felt that there was a de-escalation of the situation that was needed. I saw an opportunity and I just did it.
Yeah. I mean, consummate facilitator of joy.
Yeah.
Facilitator of calm.
Getting people what they need to be where they need to be, and whether that's emotionally or career-wise, you can be part of that journey too, and enjoy somebody else's journey along the way. Especially if you've helped a little bit. Yeah.
And I'd like to go back to this idea of going from lab to leader. I work with a lot of leaders in life science. Some of their bosses arrange for me to be their coaches because they need to bring these folks to a new level of leadership. They were in the lab and now they're in leadership roles.
Yeah.
And it doesn't always work. I hear a lot of people say, I didn't sign up for this, but this was the only path that I really could take. I'm wondering if both as from your own journey, but also as you're supporting others to make that leap from lab to leader, what are the conversations that you're having that are helping, that helped you and that are helping others to make that jump?
Yeah, well, one of the first things I'm realizing is that not everybody's on the same page. I've been doing this a long time, and then when I bring somebody in, I just sort of assume they're ready to go. And that's not always the case. I've been grinding this out and, various leadership roles for many years now. And that was a struggle for me to not just walk away and say, this is now your lane, this is your lane, and, this will be my lane, because I was wearing all the hats at the beginning. And it's a relief when you can finally hand one of those hats off. But then at the same time, you realize that those individuals haven't quite had the same journey. And so what I've had to learn is to listen very, very well and try to understand what they need and what I can give to them that will help them on their journey, get to where they need to be. And often it's support, letting them know that they're doing the right thing, because I think for a lot of people, a big roadblock is, I don't even know if I'm doing the right thing. There's no roadmap here. And so giving them constant feedback, letting them know that they're doing the right thing, I think has been critical, because then that gives them confidence to keep pushing. I think that's the biggest difference, is new leaders don't push as much as experienced leaders do. I'm constantly pushing now. I'm pushing myself, I'm pushing my team, I'm pushing our collaborators. So giving them the confidence to push, I think, has been one of the biggest advances that I've made as a boss. But listening, that's really critical. I think too many bosses like to talk, and they don't often listen enough, because you, as a boss, how you want to see it. You've got everything in your mind's eye. And I'm a little ADHD, and so or neurotic, and so when things deviate, I have to take a breath, because it's not going exactly how I envisioned it. When you bring on staff, it's never going to go that way. And so you have to give them the freedom to do what the way they want to do it, but also allow them to keep pushing. Say, this is not exactly what I had in mind, but we're moving in the right direction. Keep pushing. Let's keep making progress.
It feels like there's a bit of, you use the word bravery, but I think there's also creating a safe place for them to push, for them to make decisions, to make mistakes. Yes. It feels like there's a bit of that, the creating a safe place for them to be a leader, often with a role or with a hat that they never expected or didn't plan to be in. Would you say that creating the safety was being critical? Safe to do that was part of your story as well?
Yeah. I never really sort of consciously try to create that environment or pursue that kind of environment for myself, but without a doubt, that sort of safety net is critical. For me, I'm a little bit different, I think. For me, not that I crave working without a safety net, but somehow I always end up removing the safety net to light the fire under my butt. So, for example, I mentioned in the Huxley Morton podcast that I never took a 401k. I never took a retirement plan with any job, because I didn't want that to fall back on. I didn't want to always be waiting for retirement and saying, when I retire, I'll have all this money and I'll be able to do whatever I want to do. I wanted to say to myself, you've got nothing there unless you create it now, right? Mm. So I think it's important to create safe environments, but either maybe I'm unique, I don't know, or maybe I'm just crazy, or maybe this is part of the leadership role, is to remove all those safety nets. And I, go sort of, balls out sometimes, walking away from these other companies that I helped build and being without money, income for 6 months was difficult, but it was ethically and morally the right thing to do, and the best thing for my career too. So, safety is important for perhaps just giving that first level of permission to the new leaders. But I think once you get to a point where you're in a leadership role and you're delegating, I think, at least for me, I need to have some kind of, not fear driving me, but some kind of motivation that's, I don't know, intangible, something I can't really put my finger on, but is always there throughout my life.
It almost feels like a different type of safety. Like it's not a safety net that's going to catch you, but my sense, Ian, is that there's just something at your core that tells you it's going to be okay.
Yeah. And as you're saying that, my mind's turning, and what I'm thinking maybe is that all those hardships I talked about before, and working without the safety net and everything, what that forces me to do is become better, right? And it's when you're better, you have the confidence to then go out there and do things. I think that's really what it comes to. So it is sort of a safety net, because what I'm doing is I'm creating trying to create subconsciously perhaps a better version of myself, so that if the shit does hit the fan, if things do go sideways, I've got all these resources that I can pull from now. I've learned how to edit videos. I've learned how to run a marathon. I've learned how to have the patience to train for a marathon. All these different things have given me tools that if things do change unpredictably, I now have a toolbox that I can pull from that I wouldn't have had before. So I think you're absolutely right. You hit the nail on the head. Working without a safety net is also creating that feeling of safety, because I'm having to become a better tightrope walker.
It reminds me of Tim Ferriss, who's his podcaster. He uses the worst case scenario. So if the worst case scenario actually happened and you were sleeping on a friend's couch with nothing, then his question is, so what would you do next? What would you do to come back from that? And I have a sense that there's a version of that playing for you, that if the worst case happened, well, I know what I would do. I have the resources, I have the tools, I have the wherewithal. Well, I would know what I would do.
Yeah, I mean, that comes from, writing scripts as well. I took classes while I was a postdoc at University of Miami to write screenplays, and one of them won some awards, a sci-fi feature that I wrote. I would love to get into the movie making business, writing sci-fi movies. So if things don't go well in science, I would love to pursue that. If things don't go well there, I always said, if I didn't have a family, worst case scenario, I would go to Tibet and meditate on a mountain for a few years and figure out who I was and where I wanted to go. But there's always something. There's always something. It's when you're a leader, when you push like this, it's really, really hard to lose yourself. It's really easy to lose yourself. You work so hard, you stop exercising, perhaps you stop socializing, you focus so heavily on building the company and managing the expectations of your employees and everything else, you forget to take care of yourself. But you've always got to remember that, and I know a lot of people go into very dark places sometimes when they're in these kind of roles and they've got so much pressure on their shoulders. But, again, worst case scenario, if it ever gets that bad, you can always go to Tibet and meditate on a mountain for a couple of years. There's nothing stopping you from doing that. So I think that I've created a lot of opportunities for myself. So I don't have that fear anymore of pushing and potentially failing.
I'm curious if you could go back, and I don't know how far back this would go, but to have a conversation with your younger self, knowing what you know now, what would that conversation entail?
Well, as I mentioned, I never really had a lot of confidence back then. And so I think I would just tell myself it'll all be okay. I think that's what I needed to hear as a kid, that, it will all be okay. It was hard not having a lot of friends and moving so much. And I didn't go to a particularly good school. So I was always having to fight to get something. And I never seemed to get anything. I never seemed to get anywhere. But what I didn't realize was that I was building those resources and tools that are now so valuable to me today. So I would tell myself, just keep going, do what you're doing. It may not feel like you're getting anywhere, but you are. I really would have appreciated hearing that when I was younger.
Who in your world, and you can redact the name, but who in your world right now needs to hear that same message?
Wow. That's a tough one. I honestly don't know how to answer that. I think that I think everybody really kind of needs to think about that and realize that it's going to be okay, especially going through this whole COVID period. I think I still like to hear it occasionally that, it's going to be okay. Look at everything that we're achieving. Certainly with my family, it's been hard. I would love to remind my kids that it's all going to be okay, because I travel so much, they don't see me, but I always come back. I think it's important for them to realize that it's going to be okay. I'm just doing what I need to do right now. And, we'll always find time to be together. I think it's a bit of a cop-out answer, but I think everybody could perhaps take a moment to realize that it will all be okay. Just have confidence in yourself and just do it. If there's something you want to do, just go out there and do it. It will be okay. No matter what, you're going to see failure. As a scientist, you see failure on a regular basis, but failure is just a path to success. So that's really all I can
Well, the good news is hopefully the seed was planted. Maybe you could tell your kids or your team, maybe share that message. But the good news also is hundreds, hopefully thousands of people will hear that, what you just offered, and it'll be an encouragement for them.
I hope so. Yeah. There's so many people out there, I think, that want to, especially in academia, that want to do something more with their degrees. A book was just published recently by the Cheeky Scientist talking about how powerful PhDs are. And I think most students don't realize that, how qualified they are and how much potential they have. They just need to believe in themselves. They just need to have the confidence to do it. And they just need to take that idea and move forward.
Such gold. Thank you for that. We're at the end of our time, Ian. But before we go, if folks want to know more about you, learn more about what you're up to, what's the best place for them to go?
Well, I would love to connect on LinkedIn. I'm always interested in collaborations and just connecting with other scientists is always a passion of mine, but not just scientists. I'm a member of many different groups, everything from growing mushrooms to drone flying. I just bought a new drone because I'm excited to see how that works. We get these 3D goggles so you can actually fly like a bird. It's pretty exciting. So I'm always interested in just connecting with people who love to share ideas. So LinkedIn is always a great place. Neobiosis is our website. That's always a good place to connect and see what we're doing. We also just launched the American College of Regenerative Medicine. So if there are any individuals out there interested in the space of regenerative medicine, I would urge them to come by tacrm.org and see what we're doing there. Become a member, support us, join the club. What else? I'm writing a book at the moment called The Unified Theory of Life, about what aging is and what we can do as scientists to potentially slow and even stop aging. So, I'm always writing. Anybody interested in collaborating on a book or a journal article, definitely reach out. We're working with a lot of clinicians right now in IND studies to understand the safety and efficacy of a lot of our products. So any clinicians out there that are interested in any indication that's associated with aging, anything degenerative, let's talk. Let's see if there's an opportunity to collaborate.
Awesome. Well, we'll put some the key links in the show notes that people can reach out.
Appreciate that.
Ian, this has been a lot of fun. I would imagine we could probably have kept talking for about another hour or two, and I look forward to when we have a chance to do that. So thank you so much for sharing your heart.
Oh, you're very welcome. This has been a pleasure, and I can't believe how fast time has flown. But I really enjoyed talking with you. I enjoy the podcast. Congratulations on a really great show. Thank you for inviting me. I'm excited to be part of it.
You're most welcome.